I want to ask you something before we start. Have you ever looked at a house, a completely normal, nothing special, three-bedroom house in a completely normal neighborhood, and felt a kind of quiet rage that you couldn't entirely explain? Not because the house is beautiful or because you desperately want that specific house. Just because of what it represents. Because the number attached to it is so disconnected from any income you can realistically imagine earning that it stops feeling like real estate and starts feeling like a joke. A joke being told at your expense by a market that doesn't care, in a language where the punchline is always the same. You can't afford it. That feeling is not irrational. That feeling is not entitlement. That feeling is what it feels like when math stops working in ways that people with authority keep insisting is working fine. Today, we're going to do the one thing nobody in the housing industry wants you to do. We're going to run the honest math. Not the math that gets you to closing. The math that determines whether you can actually live in the house without the purchase slowly dismantling every other part of your financial life. My name is Astrid,
welcome to my
and by the
office.
time this video ends,
so glad
you're
you're
going to
here.
know exactly who can afford a house
I
right now,
understand
and the
how
answer
you
is going to
feel.
make you angry.
Let me
Not
help
because
you.
I'm going to manipulate you into feeling that way, but because the numbers, seen clearly, produce that reaction in almost every honest person who looks at them. Subscribe, because this is a conversation the housing industry spends a lot of money making sure doesn't happen this clearly. Let's establish what we're working with. The median home price in America in 2026 sits around $420,000 nationally. In major metro areas and their surrounding suburbs, where most jobs are, where most people actually need to live to sustain their careers, median prices are routinely between $450,000 and $650,000. In coastal cities, the floor for anything livable starts above $700,000. For the purposes of this analysis, we're going to use $450,000. Not the most expensive market. Not the cheapest. The middle of where most employed Americans with professional careers are actually looking. The 30-year fixed mortgage rate in 2026 has been holding between 6.2% and 6.8%. This is the part that confuses a lot of people who remember hearing that the Federal Reserve cut rates. The Fed cutting rates does not directly cut mortgage rates. Mortgage rates follow 10-year Treasury yields, which respond to inflation expectations and long-term economic forecasts, not the Fed funds rate. The Fed cut rates 3 times in 2025. Mortgage rates have barely moved. They were at 6.26% when the cut started and are around 6.4% today. The relief that was supposed to come to homebuyers has not materialized. So, for $150,000 home, 6.4% mortgage rate. Let's build the real monthly cost. Assuming 10% down, $45,000, which is already more than 5 times the median American savings balance, your loan is $405,000. Principal and interest on that loan at 6.4% over 30 years, $2,533 per month. Add property taxes. National average on a $450,000 home, approximately $450 per month. Add homeowners insurance. With premiums elevated across the country due to climate risk and rising replacement costs, $250 per month, conservatively. Add PMI because you put down less than 20%, $200 per month. Add maintenance. 1% of value annually, $375 per month. Total monthly cost of owning a $450,000 home in 2026, $3,808. Every month. Before you turn on a light. Before you pay for internet. Before you buy a single piece of furniture or a single roll of toilet paper. $3,808 leaves your account just for the right to sleep there. Now, let's find out who can actually pay that. The 28% rule, the standard financial guideline for housing costs as a percentage of gross income, requires $163,200 per year to make $3,808 feel sustainable. That is a household income in the top 20% of American earners. The 36% guideline, already pushing the edge of financial comfort, still requires $127,000 per year. The 43% rule, What banks use as their maximum approval threshold requires $106,000 per year. This is the number that gets you approved. This is not the number that makes the purchase livable. The median household income in America, $84,000. Let me be absolutely clear about what that gap means. The median American household, not the poorest, not the struggling, the median, the exact middle, earns $84,000 per year. A $450,000 home requires $163,000 to afford comfortably. That is nearly double the median income required for the median home in the middle of the price range. This is not a situation where people need to budget a little more carefully or skip a few vacations. This is a structural impossibility for the majority of the country. The housing market is priced for an income distribution that does not exist for most of the people living inside it. But let's go to where it gets truly uncomfortable. Because the people who are actually buying these homes, the ones who are making it work in some form, are not median earners. They're the upper middle class. Two-income professional households with good jobs. The people who feel like they should be fine. Let's run their numbers. Two professionals. Combined household income of $155,000. Above the 80th percentile of American earners. People who, by any reasonable cultural definition, should be able to afford a normal house. After taxes, federal, state, FICA, take-home pay is approximately $9,200 per month. Subtract the $3,808 housing cost. Left, $5,392. Now the rest of their life. Two car payments. These are professionals who commute. $1,380. Car insurance for two vehicles. $260. Gas at 2026 prices. $340. Student loans required to get the jobs that earn $155,000 combined, $720. Health insurance premiums above employer contribution, $390. Groceries, $780. Utilities and phone, $420. Total fixed monthly expenses outside housing, $4,290. Amount remaining after housing and fixed expenses, $1,102 per month. $1,102. For two adults. For clothing. For medical expenses. For car repairs. For home repairs that exceed the maintenance budget. For any travel. For gifts. For entertainment. For the dentist. For anything unexpected. And for savings beyond whatever the employer matches in a 401k. This is what $155,000 per year looks like when you buy a $450,000 house in 2026. Not struggling. Not irresponsible. Earning in the top 20% of American households. And left with $1,102 per month to exist outside of the fixed obligations. That number, $1,102, is one medical bill away from going negative. It is one car repair away from the credit card. It is 1 month of reduced hours or unexpected expense away from the feeling that everything is falling apart, despite the fact that by every external measure this household is doing everything right. This is what the housing market has done. It has created a situation where being in the top 20% of earners, making every responsible financial decision, and buying a house in the middle of the price range produces a monthly budget with less than $300 per adult per week of flexibility. I want to talk about what nobody says out loud about this situation. The thing that sits underneath every conversation about housing affordability but almost never gets named directly. The reason the housing market is priced this way, the reason it has become structurally impossible for the majority of Americans, is not a natural market outcome. It is the result of specific, accumulated decisions that benefited specific groups of people at the expense of everyone who came after. For 30 years, single-family zoning laws restricted supply in desirable areas. Investor purchases of residential properties accelerated, particularly during low-interest rate periods, removing homes from the owner-occupied market and adding them to the rental market. Short-term rental platforms converted residential housing stock into commercial operations in neighborhoods across the country. Institutional buyers purchase thousands of homes in single transactions, operating at scales that individual buyers cannot match. None of this is illegal. All of it has collectively produced a housing market where the people who need homes to live in are competing on unequal terms with entities that view those same homes as financial instruments. The result is that home prices have increased approximately 400% since 1990, while median household income has increased roughly 180% in the same period. Those two numbers cannot both be true without the majority of people being priced out. And they are both true. And the majority of people are priced out. And yet the cultural narrative insists that homeownership is attainable if you just want it badly enough and make the right choices. You can want it with everything you have and make every right choice and still not be able to afford it. Not because of a personal failure, because of math. So what do you do with this? First, stop using approval as a proxy for affordability. The bank approves you based on whether they think you can make payments for long enough that their risk is covered. They are not calculating whether you can also live a life, save for retirement, maintain the house, handle emergencies, and maintain your mental health while making those payments. You have to calculate that. We just did it together. Run your actual numbers before you run to a lender for approval. Second, if the honest math says you can't afford the $450,000 house without leaving yourself $1,100 per month, don't buy it. Not because of the financial risk in theory, because of what your actual daily life will feel like inside that budget. The stress of financial tightness is not romantic. It does not make the house feel more earned. It makes the house feel like a prison you chose voluntarily and now cannot leave. Third, the rent versus buy calculation is not what your parents told you it was. In many markets in 2026, renting and investing the difference between what you'd pay in rent versus mortgage costs produces better financial outcomes over 10 years than buying. This is true despite the emotional, cultural, and social pressure to buy. Run the math for your specific market. The math sometimes says rent. Trust the math over the narrative. Fourth, if you are going to buy, the single most financially protective thing you can do is buy below what you're approved for. Not at the ceiling. Well below it. The bank will approve you for $450,000 if your income is $106,000. Buy the $320,000 house. Live in less square footage. Have $600 more per month to invest, to save, to exist with. The financial freedom that comes from buying below your means compounds over years in ways that are completely invisible on closing day and completely obvious 5 years later. The anger you feel when you look at housing prices is not a character flaw. It is a rational response to a rational observation. The math doesn't work. You can see that it doesn't work. You've been running it in your head every time you open a listing, and every time you look at your paycheck, and every time someone older tells you to stop waiting and just buy something. The math is telling you something true. And the people telling you to ignore the math have, in most cases, already bought their houses at prices that made the math work. Listen to the math. Not because homeownership is wrong or unworthy or something to be avoided, but because a home you can't afford is not a home. It is a financial obligation that follows you into every room, sits at the dinner table, and doesn't leave when the company goes home. The right home, bought at the right price, at the right moment, with the right income behind it, is one of the best financial and personal decisions a person can make. That is genuinely true. The wrong home, bought under pressure, at the wrong price, with income that can't support it, is one of the most damaging financial decisions a person can make. That is equally true. The difference between them is not the house. It's the math. And now you know how to run it. I'll see you in the next one.